Welcome to Noise Violation Podcast. Today, our guest is Dr. Rosalyn Dischiavo. She is the founder and director of ISEE. And tell us, what is the ISEE, Rosalyn?
So ISEE stands for, we call it ISEE, and it stands for Institute for Sexuality, Education, and Development. It's a professional training program for educators, counselors, and therapists who want to specialize in the field of human sexuality.
And so, how did you get to this point where you're founding this organization of sexuality, education, and enlightenment? Tell us about your background. Where are you from, and kind of what schools you went to, what classes you took?
Okay, so I have always been a sort of side-by-side, a health educator or a health promotion specialist, along with being a clinician. So I began with sort of some clinical work in the field, but I was also always doing, in the beginning, was prevention, right? Like drug and alcohol prevention. And later what they realized was that prevention is really health promotion. That's what it is. Like, you tell people what could go wrong if you want to prevent, let's say, drug and alcohol abuse, or you want to prevent eating disorders, or you want to prevent suicide, or any of the negative things that can happen with teenagers, and of course anyone. You really want health promotion. You want to promote wellness. So I've been doing that since I was very young. Like 19 years old was my very first job that was clinical, and I was a clinical assistant at sort of a, let's call it a troubled boys home, right? Like a home for troubled youth, if you will. It was actually a large program in Norwalk, Connecticut. And I started there, and then I became a counselor, and I was doing drug and alcohol counseling.
So can we even stop it right there? Like before you even
Sure.
got into that, what even inspired you to go to the troubled boys home? Did you have a family member or something that went through problems, or how did you?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Almost anyone that you meet in the field of addiction has some personal connection to that topic. I remember at one point I was working at a treatment center in Bloomfield, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that every single person who worked there, down to the receptionists and the woman who worked in medical records, had some connection. Either they were recovering alcoholic, or they had some primary family member who was either recovering in recovery, or was actively an alcoholic, or had it in their past, like they were an adult child of an alcoholic, right?
Right. Yeah.
Every single person, the night person, the staff nurses, everyone. So that field definitely does attract that, and yes, that was definitely.
Yeah, and so I mean, I have that runs in my family as well. I have addiction in my family and anxiety in my family. Is that just like a natural thing in people to be addicts? Is it like, I guess, are they coping with something, or what leads people to become an addict of alcohol, or are they treating a symptom?
So now you're talking about a whole other thing that I don't really do anymore, right? Like,
Oh,
I
okay.
haven't been in that field for many, many years. And I think I could answer that question, but I think you're better off actually asking a professional who has worked in the field much more currently than I. I think that might be another podcast for you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, let's just keep going on your education then. And
Sure. I don't mean to put you off. I just feel like I can't speak to it as well as I would have at one point.
oh no, yeah, thanks for letting me know.
Yeah. So I did that for quite a few years, but really what that did was it opened up the field of health promotion and health education to me. So for a long, long time, I was doing both clinical work, either counseling or therapy, side by side with health promotion. And that started way back then. I was doing work with a program called Youth Options, which had programs in the schools in Southern Connecticut. And I was also doing counseling at a drug and alcohol treatment program. But what I really realized is that I really wanted to move much more into the field of health promotion. I was less interested in therapy at that point or counseling. So I went back to school and I finished my bachelor's degree in human services, because at that time you could be a drug and alcohol counselor and not even have a bachelor's degree, and I did not when I started.
Okay.
This is way back when. And but by the time I was done, I did have my degree and I had a certification as a drug and alcohol counselor. I was licensed eventually as a counselor in the state of Connecticut. And then I moved in more and more into health promotion and health education. I got a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, which was kind of a follow-up, like, let me get my master's and really learn how to do this right. I was in private practice at that time, so I did a lot of sort of 20-hour job at a drug and alcohol facility, and then on the side I would be doing workshops of my own, or I would be doing school. So I was in my master's program at that point, and I got an MFT, which is marriage and family therapy, which I would be happy to talk about if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there to talk about. So I guess you're working at a clinic, and what were your side gigs? What was that you were doing?
So private practice. So I opened up a private practice and I would see families and teenagers, and I had a specialty with adolescents for a long time, and individuals who just needed therapy, needed help of some kind.
So were they lashing out? Were they like troublemakers or drug abuse?
No, not usually. I mean, the teenagers that I saw were usually, struggling with drug and alcohol, but they were folks that had already gone to a program and were, sober and trying to like learn how to live sober. So that was something that I specialized in for a while. As a therapist, you're really not supposed to work with active alcoholics and addicts. Some people make exceptions for that, but for the most part, you can't really get anywhere. What you find is that you go round and round and round, you don't even, if you're not trained in it, you don't even know what's happening.
Right.
But the person is not going to make any headway, because alcohol and drugs by nature change your emotions, and therapy by nature is learning how to deal with them. So
Yeah.
What happens is during the therapy, if someone is, always either high or altered or coming off of a high or a drug, drinking, they don't have full access to their emotions, and therefore they don't have full access to their healing so they have to, it's a primary problem. They have to take care of the drug and alcohol problem first for the most part.
Right. So they would go to a rehab and get all the
Right.
symptoms out of their system, and then
right. And then I would do like aftercare.
Right. Then they would learn how to deal with their emotions and not go back to those things that are harming them. Yeah, so that's interesting. And so as that side gig, you're doing that, and then that slowly developed into the ISEE. I guess kind of lead me on that path to how we got to.
So we're talking about a long time here, Blake, right? I'm not, I'm not 25, right?
Yeah, we got time.
Right, I'm in my 50s. So you're talking about a period of about 25 years, almost 30 years, right? I started as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
So over time, with the marriage and family therapy degree, I did the therapy, and then I really, really wanted to go back into more wellness focus, so health promotion, wellness, and that's where that I started to work at University of Hartford, and I was working at first for the counseling center, but I was also the health educator for the campus, and eventually I became director of the wellness center there. Which is all about the health promotion, health education, and also the director of the Women's Center. So that was the next step in the career. And that was such a beautiful step, because that brought me into the educational realm, where I was working, in an academic setting. And I just adored that. It was one of my favorite jobs I ever had, for sure.
Right. It sounded like you had all the credentials already with the degrees and experience, and so it kind of naturally led you into education.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. And I love to teach. I mean, what I learned over the years is that I really, really, really love to teach. It is my favorite thing to do. So when I looked at myself doing therapy, I realized even as a therapist, I had a very educational style. And as an educator, I have a very therapeutic style, right? So when I go into a classroom, I'm not just helping people understand concepts, I'm also bringing them into the experience as a whole human being. So, everything is present, and when you teach about human sexuality, which is, I started to do much more when I went into university, because when you are working as the health educator, health promotion specialist at a university, you're talking about sex all the time. You're talking about safer sex, you're talking about sexual assault prevention, you're talking about, STIs, you're talking about pregnancy. I mean, and you're just talking about relationships and wellness and intimacy. And how do you do that? How do you create a relationship? How do you create good communication between people? And so I really, I had a lot of fun with that. It is still my favorite thing to do. But I think that when you go into teaching about a subject like sexuality, it's not it's not like math, right? It's not 2 and 2 is 4, or here's your formula and here's what you do, or here's what we need you to know about what happened when Winston Churchill, made this speech, right?
Yeah.
Those are kind of facts that you can deal with. When it comes to human sexuality or human wellness, when you teach about that, there are emotions involved. And so you're always creating an atmosphere in the classroom of community, so that people feel comfortable and safer talking to each other about the subject that has so much stigma and has so much baggage around it. And because of that, people actually experience the classes as sort of a healing thing for them. Often they feel really free, like, oh, wow, I never knew that was okay. Or, oh,
Hmm.
wow, I never realized I felt that way. Or I never realized that I could tell my partner, I don't want to do that. That's the other thing, right? Like all kinds of things people have. And then also just like, wow, I wonder why I made such a big deal out of this. We can talk about this. We can talk about this in a way that's respectful, but at the same time, not fraught with fear and stigma and shame, right? So
Hmm.
people often feel very liberated when they're learning about human sexuality, because of those things. And so as a person who teaches, it's good to know that it's sort of it's a therapeutic topic, if you will. And you kind of have to know not only facts, but also how to deal with the energy and the emotions in the room.
Right. And I don't even think it's taught very well in, probably kindergarten through high school and
No, it is not. Sometimes not taught at all.
right.
And definitely not taught well. There's very few places that do it well.
And I mean, you might get the STD talk where it says wear a condom or something, but you're never really taught how to explore your sexuality or open up or talk to your partner. So I think it is one of those taboo topics, and especially now, since you mentioned like it's so much wrapped around feelings, and so I'm sure it's a hard subject to teach. And so, I guess, how did you educate yourself on all these topics when it's it's like an evolving topic, it seems, with different genders now, like people want to be called different things. Like, do you stay up to date with all that?
Yeah, so I actually, after being at the university for a while, a couple things happened. I actually became a co-host on a radio show in Hartford. It was an FM station. We had a lot of fun, myself and a co-host, and I was doing that for about a year and a half. And I realized that having the discussion and we talked a lot about sexuality. It was like two women talking about sex, two different generations of women, and we had a lot of fun. And I realized that was the main thing that I wanted to do. And so I went back to school and I got a doctorate in human sexuality. And that was my next move professionally. And when I got out, I didn't know what I was going to do with that degree, right? I didn't know what I was going to do. And I thought, well, like, obviously I want to teach, but other than that, I didn't know how I was going to teach, where I was going to teach, who I was going to teach, right? And then what occurred to me was that in the sexuality realm, you have these sort of two very strong groups of people who have a tendency to do the educating. One group is who I call the sort of airy-fairy woo-woo people, right? And they are all about sacred sexuality, and I say this being one of those people. So I'm gonna make fun of it, but know that I'm making fun of myself, right? So I am definitely very airy-fairy woo-woo, very hippy-dippy, right? But there's a lot of folks that do like energy work and energy and sexuality and relationship and intimacy, but it's all very fluffy. It's not particularly academic most of the time. It can be, but most people who are teaching that, it's very fluffy. There's not a lot of academic rigor to that, right? It's very experiential. It's
more like energies rather than like biological sciences or something.
Yeah, yeah. And also very, very good, like for instance, Human Awareness Institute. That's a wonderful organization. They teach intimacy and sexuality, and it's very good information about relationships and sex and sexual communication, like excellent. So you have that too in the hippy dippy woo woo people, right? But on the other side, you have who I call the plumbers, right? It's all mechanical to them, right? And I've met a lot of these people when I went through my doctoral program. They're like, yeah, as long as you can find the clitoris, you're fine. You know, you just need to know how to, you know, these are the things. If you know how to identify these body parts, everything's fine. You know, and they're very much about plumbing and reproductive biology and how it works, and very academic, and in a way that to me felt disembodied. Like it was too much in our heads, and I thought, how can I teach about sex if I'm not even like in touch with my own body? Like you just like it's all academic, and it's like that didn't work for me. So I wanted to find a way to create a bridge between those two groups of people, both of whom I found to be very valuable, right? Because on the academic side, even though I make fun of them and I call them the plumbers, I'm also one of them, right? I am the person who is the total sex geek, who needs to know, you know, how does that work? And how many anatomy books have I read now? Because believe it or not, we can't read enough anatomy books. You know, it's a major thing that you absolutely will find that anatomy is a thing. So having said that, sorry, I think I have an animal scratching at the door.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
I think it's my cat. Oh no, it's my dog. She still hasn't left. Sorry about that. Maybe you can cut that out of the podcast. Anyway, I'm also one of those people. So I really want to know everything, every fact out there. And when I opened ISEE, I literally woke up at 3 a.m. one morning. This is a true story. And I had the idea for the Institute running around my head, and the name just created itself. And I was like, oh, I could make it, you know, this acronym. And this is literally 3:30 in the morning, right? And all of a sudden, just I started to have idea after idea after idea about courses I could put together. And wow, we should put a program together where people can have the hippy dippy woo woo stuff and the really academic plumbing stuff and put them together so that they can work together and be more holistic. And so that's what I did. I created a program along with a lot of really other wonderful folks that I brought in to create courses, my faculty members, that we call holistic sex education training and holistic sex therapy training. So, and we call it holistic because it is that bridge between the highly intellectual and the highly embodied. And the embodied part I think of as the emotional, spiritual, communication, relational part, and then that highly intellectual part. So that's why we call it holistic sex education and holistic sex therapy training.
And do you see the plumber as like the more males and fairies as more females? Is there a really any way to break it down?
I wouldn't put it that way. What I would say is that the plumbers are more, let's say it's a patriarchal way to look at education. But when I say patriarchal, I don't mean men. I mean that the system
Right.
is that idea that somehow men are, they're highly intellectual and they're just logic and facts is really bullshit, right? It's total bullshit, right? And if you've ever talked to a man, you know that that's bullshit. But that is what people believe, and therefore that is what was valued in academia for a long time. And I believe it's still often the way that academics see the world. They, there are what they call the hard sciences, right? That's medicine and biology and engineering and whatever, right? And then there are the soft sciences, right? And that's psychology and, sociology and anthropology. And it's like, really? But that's literally, we do that thing because in our culture, we still have the idea that the highly intellectualized is a male function, which we know it isn't, but we still think, somehow we still buy into that. And that the highly emotional is a female function, which again, we know it isn't, right? Men are sometimes often as easily as emotional as women, sometimes more. But because we value that end of things, and because we have a history of being male driven in terms of our value systems, we're stuck with the remnants of that. So a lot of educational processes are highly intellectualized and really cut off from the body, the emotions, and how we feel in any way, shape, or form, right? And people who say that's bullshit, that's not true anymore, all you got to do is walk around on your first cold winter's day in New England, right? Are you still in New England?
I'm in Austin, Texas.
Oh, you're in Texas. I'm sorry, because I'm the person who connected me with you. I met them in New England. So
yeah, Erica is my girlfriend, actually.
Yeah. So if you go out in a cold climate in New England, and it could be like 30 degrees outside, and there are guys who are dressed like you with shorts on, and there could be snow on the ground, and they're walking around with shorts on, and if you actually know the guy and are like, come on, get real, you're cold, right? And they'll be like, yeah, it's freezing. But like, you can't act like you're cold, right? Because your body is not supposed to matter if you're a guy, right? That's that whole thing. So it all ties in together. We have a tendency to ignore the body, and men, I think, have been trained more than women. Ignore your body, not ignore your sexuality, ignore your body.
Yeah, and so how do you open that up in men? Do you have sessions with men?
I don't do any therapy anymore.
No.
I do only education. I don't do any therapy, but we do train therapists, right? And that's a really good question. So how do you open up that in men? I mean, you're a younger guy, so are you a millennial?
I'm 32, so whatever.
So you're a millennial, right?
Born in 87.
Yeah, so your generation actually did a much better job with helping men to be like, I've got emotions, what's the big deal?
Right.
So how do you think, how do you think your friends or men that access that with each other? Like, what's the easiest way for them to access that?
I think my generation's kind of it's the last generation that saw like the old school way, and now we're seeing like the new school way. So we kind of have a different perspective than earlier generations where they weren't so much online, and now there's a lot of online stuff. And so the way I've done it is, I've researched a lot. There's so much information out there on YouTube or different websites or trainings like your own that you're trying to promote. And so to really understand myself, I've done some soul searching, and I think it's through just teachers like yourself, just seeking out information and to understand that to try to get ideas of both perspectives. And so with, you know, you only, back in the day, it was like you had your one teacher and they taught you that one thing and you didn't have really any other resources to go to. But now it's like there's so much information out there that it's almost like overwhelming if you really look at it. And so I guess to open up and to really be vulnerable, one of the people I've listened to was Brene Brown.
Yes.
She talks about vulnerability and how it's a superpower, and to be like as open and honest as you can. And so that was something that I struggled with when I was younger, was to really you know, be vulnerable and to put myself out there. And now it's a practice. Like, it doesn't come easy, but you know, it's the baby steps and a little bit at a time, and to just challenge myself to do the things that, you know, that I'm scared of or that I want, and to really understand myself and what I want. And I think it is scary for a lot of men, but you know, it's certainly achievable. I think you
Absolutely.
you have to want it.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So you sort of answered your own question.
You turned it around on me.
I did. I'm good at that, right? That's my therapist background, right? But seriously, teaching isn't about telling people things. Teaching is about this, what you and I are doing now, right? It's about having a conversation between two people or between many people and getting ideas going both ways. You know, that's good teaching. If you
Yeah.
think as a teacher that it's your job to just deposit information into other people and then that means you've succeeded, I feel bad for your students.
Right. And that was one of the goals of this podcast, actually, was to teach people. It's like to bring on interesting people, and for actually me to learn as I'm sharing what I'm learning with other people. And so you know, I've brought on psychologists, I've brought on dream analysts, I've brought on news anchors, I've brought on just so many different people from different backgrounds and different fields. And so I think it is like it's just so interesting to me to, you know, see what other people's passions are, and to see what their point of views are, and to really learn myself, to make myself a better person. But I guess, so if we went from the plumber breaking into the fairy, how does the fairy go into the plumbing? Do they get bored with the plumbing?
Well, it's not so much that one goes into the other, right? It's that we bring both sides. Does that make sense? So our classes, for instance, we will always bring all sides. So what that means is that we're never there's almost never going to be a class where we're just telling people things. Here's the facts, learn those, right? It'll be, here are some facts. How do you feel about those facts? What do you think about those facts, right? And that's, of course, a general part of teaching most people are aware of. But we will also bring the body into it. So what we might do is say, all right, everybody stand up. You know, the invitation is to either close your eyes or perhaps, you know, put your gaze on the floor, because some people don't like to close their eyes. And take a breath. And just notice what your body's feeling in this moment. And what do you notice? And people will go, wow, I just noticed I feel scared. I didn't even know I was feeling scared. Oh, okay. Or I have this unbelievable feeling in my chest, like my whole heart is opening up, you know? And people will say these things. And these are really important parts of integrating our learning, because we do learn with the whole body, you know? So that's the sort of hippy-dippy part, if you will, right? But it's not, because, you know, nothing that we do is so out there that people don't understand why we're doing it. And we always tell people why we're doing it. If nothing else, and we always tell people, you don't have to buy into this. You know, you don't have to do our breath exercises, whatever. But actually, even if you are the most intellectualized, highly intellectualized, non-emotional person in the world, and you go to our classes, we give you the reason why you should move around when we have our movement exercises during class, and that's because it literally helps you to learn. Gets your blood flow going in your brain, and it helps you to, they know that if you move more when you're learning, you actually retain the information, you have better recall later, you have better concentration. So we give the geeks that need their intellectual, that piece, because it's true. And we also bring that in to be like, where's your spirit at? Where's your heart at? You know, how does your body feel? And people will take it as very hippy dippy fairy woo woo as they want. And some people will be like, oh, that just felt good. It just relaxed me. I had a stress reduction. We don't push it. We don't have an agenda on pushing that. We just make space for it, and then people do with it what they like.
Right. I think it also brings awareness and to their bodies and to what they're feeling, and then actually putting a label on it. I don't think many people actually, you know, take the time to say, oh, I'm stressed. They just run around stressed without actually knowing that they're stressed.
That's right.
So I think, yeah, I could see that. So it brings it into something concrete, you know, where their energy may just be flowing, but they don't know what type of energy it is, or they haven't labeled it. And so, so what are some common misconceptions or things people may be doing wrong about sex or sexuality?
Wow. So that's, of course, a really big question, but I do have a couple things that pop to mind right away, right?
Yeah.
So one of the first things is that most people now learn how to have sex through watching porn. And they don't know that that's why they don't understand that that's part of what's happening, right? Because they're usually using it just for their own pleasure, right? You're watching porn for your own pleasure. Maybe it's a masturbation practice. So, and that's the biggest reason why people watch porn, right? Is for their own self-pleasure.
Right.
And so it doesn't occur to them that they're also taking in information, and that could be influencing how they think sex happens, right?
Right.
It's totally unconscious. It's like watching TV and thinking everybody's, you know, you should be wealthy and own a house with a picket fence because everyone on TV has that, right?
It's like if you want to be a basketball player, you'll watch Michael Jordan or something. But if you want to have sex, then you watch.
Well, the thing about that is, like, that's not even what happens. People don't at all some people consciously say, I want to know how to get better at having sex, so I'm going to watch the porn stars. Some people do. Or they'll say, that's a good technique, I'm going to use that with my girlfriend or my boyfriend or my
taking notes over here.
Some people do that. But what's much more difficult to help people understand is that most people simply it's media literacy, right? If you watch enough of the same thing over and over again, you just assume that is the norm, that is how things are, and you don't ever even understand that you're assuming that. You're learning something without realizing you're learning it. So what I noticed is when I was teaching at the university, where I met your girlfriend, is that somewhere in the 90s, the late 90s, I think, and early 2000s, my students started to have more and more and more problems with sexuality. And what it was that they were expecting sex to look like what they were watching. And they didn't even, it was totally unexamined. They didn't know that that's what they were expecting or why they were expecting it, right? And so, I don't know, is it okay to be a little graphic on here? I don't want to freak out.
Yeah, go as far as you want.
Okay, so I don't want to freak out your listeners. So this is a listener warning. If you don't want to hear graphic sexuality education information, please don't listen. So one of the biggest things, for instance, was people would say, well, I don't know how to have the anal sex. You know, I'm really bad at that. You know, I tried it and I didn't know what I was doing, and it was awful, right? And the reason that happens so frequently, both men and women, like people with penises and people without, right? Was because they were watching porn, which is very heavily edited. And they thought, this is how I do anal sex. And then they were creating a lot of pain and damage. And, you know, they didn't understand this porn star or this person who was doing this had all of this warm up before that ever happened that was totally edited out. And now you're just seeing the action of this penetration. You're not seeing what happened beforehand to help that person, even porn stars. And you could talk, you know, for instance, Jessica Drake is a porn star who does sex ed now. And one of the reasons she does it is because she got really appalled by how many women were walking up to her and saying, oh, I wish I could do anal the way you do. I just can't do that. And she was like, wait a minute, like I have a half an hour of prep before we go to it. But then she realized, oh, they don't know that. And and she was appalled. She was like, you mean you just start? And she was like, yeah, well, you know, all these women are like, yeah, they just start, you know? Yeah. And so we don't know that. We just automatically assume, well, this must be easy. This looks like a vagina. I'm just going to go in, right? Right. And next thing you know, somebody's in real major pain and it creates a relationship problem. That's kind of a classic thing. So what we like to say, Marty Klein, who's another sex educator, he likes to say, if you think about porn, think about what would you know about football? What would you know about how to play football if you only ever watched the highlights? Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. So it takes the judgment out of it. It isn't porn is bad, porn is evil, right? It's supposed to be the most intense parts of it because most people are only watching it for 5-6 minutes at a time. So that right, it's like watching the news or something. You just want to see the drama or the action, or that's right. You don't want to see that boring. Right. And so the whole way that porn is set up is not set up to show real sex. It's set up to show the highlights. But then if that's all you ever saw and that was the thing that you watched, it's just in your head. You don't even think about it. You don't even assume. Unless you're a thinking person. So when you go to have sex, now you figure this is how I should do it without ever asking any questions or questioning that in your head. And so that's one of the biggest issues with sexuality right now, is that people of all genders often assume that sex should look like a certain thing. Instead of creating a sexual relationship with someone, even if it's for one night, you can still create a sexual relationship for one night, right? And what is that? Yeah, what does that healthy sexual relationship look like? What are the, I guess, the foreplay or commonalities, or what is that? So you're asking me a question. It's a funny thing. Like I have a tendency to laugh because some people want a formula, right? Tell me how to have good sex. Yeah, I'm the plumber. I'm the engineer. You're the plumber. You want the tricks and the tips. Yeah, and it doesn't work that way. If you want tricks and tips, watch porn for tricks and tips. But here's how to have good sex. Good sex is not tricks and tips. Good sex is, basically exploring with each other. So I think of it like an improvisation. You're trying something, you see how your partner reacts or responds, and then you try a little more, ask the person how they feel about it, look at the cues of their body are giving you, and you can do this very naturally. People often laugh at, some of the consent conversations where people are saying, well, I'm not going to ask every step of the way if I have to do this or if I want to do that. You don't have to, but you can do things that are really hot that answer the same question. So you can say, how do you like that? Mm-hmm. Right? That's way sexier than, do I have permission to touch your breast now? You're not going to do that, unless you're role playing, nerdy professor or something, right? Like you're not going to do that, but you can say, how do you like that? Or does that feel good? Even just like a simple, without any nuance to the to the tone, does that feel good? And if the person is quiet, that's not a good sign, right? So you're going to create something together, right? Or if the person is, maybe if they're moaning, it's a good sign, but if they don't say anything, it's probably not a good sign, right? Or if they say, if someone moves your hand from one place on their body to another place on their body, that's another sign that I want to be touched there. Or it's a sign, I want you to touch me here.
Right.
But either way, there's a communication happening, right? So if you're afraid to use your words, which, you know, as a sex educator, we always like people to get to the point where they can use their words. Here's what I would like, you know, and, you know, hey, you know, what do you want to do? You know,
Right.
No matter how long people have been together, by the way, you know
So
what I mean?
it sounds like you need to be a good listener. So it's not all about what you want or what I want. It's also about like what the other person wants. And
yeah,
so
it's about both, because what I find is that a lot of folks are so eager to please their partner that they don't listen to their own body at all. They're just like, I'm here to perform, and I'm going to perform, and I'm going to give this person an orgasm. And then when they've come, then it's my turn. I can relax. And it's so, you know, there are a lot of people where it's so embedded in them that that's what the formula is, and that's what they have to do. And if they don't do that, they're not a good lover. Instead of maybe having a conversation and saying, hey, you really turn me on. I may come really quick because you really turn me on, but I promise we can go again, you know, like I may come really quick, but believe me, you know, I will come back from that, and then it'll be your turn. You know, like that's a simple thing you could say to someone that most people can totally appreciate, especially if you say, this is why, you know, it's because you're making me really hot, you know, you're really hot with your partner. There's a lot of ways you can do that, but it's not about tips and tricks. It's about comfort with talking about your body, your needs, their body, their needs, asking a question. If you have comfort in bed, you will be a good lover. You will.
Yeah.
And the way to get that is to start by talking to your friends about sex. Start by talking to whoever will talk to you in a comfortable way about it until you get very, very comfortable with the subject, right? Maybe you do take a sex education class online, you know, it doesn't have to be at my institute, it could be, but probably not. But you know, because we pretty much do professional stuff, but you know, maybe you do take a sex education class online. Maybe you go to a sex educator who helps you, coaches you to be more comfortable talking about it. Maybe you just get a group of friends together and say, I want to talk about sex once a month. Anybody in? You know? Yeah. And then you can really have the conversations, and then everybody starts to relax a little bit, right? Everybody's sort of more comfortable, like, oh, you mean that happened to you too? Oh, yeah, that happened to me. And if you can get people of many genders, because that way you really understand, wow, you know what, there's a lot of similarities between us. Like, I think sometimes we spend too much time saying, well, women have a clitoris and you have to be able to find it. That is absolutely true. That is absolutely true, because if you think that this is going to do the same thing as accessing the clitoris, you're just probably barking up the wrong tree, right? Having said that, that is not the whole ball game by a long shot, right? So knowing how to talk about sexuality,
yeah, and I think
comfortable.
Yeah, like you're saying, just be comfortable and have fun and enjoy yourself, and to reciprocate or to make sure the other person's having fun and enjoying themselves. And so I think that's definitely great advice. Some of the conversations I didn't have when I was younger, probably, or anyone, because they don't teach any of this stuff in schools. They don't teach about sex really. So I think what you're doing is great, and to put it out in the open, and for it to be not culturally taboo about just topics that are so important.
Yeah. No matter what your values are, right? So my thing is not to, I don't see it as my job to make everyone comfortable with everything. That's not how it is. There's things I'm certainly not comfortable with. I have been a sex educator my entire adult career, either part-time or full-time. I'm not comfortable with everything, and that's okay. I think it's more important that we learn what we're comfortable with and what we're not and why, and then be able to talk about that and explain and explore.
And what was your inspiration for your book, The Deep Yes?
Yeah, so the book, The Deep Yes, is all about receiving. It's called The Deep Yes, The Lost Art of True Receiving. And it is literally all about how to receive instead of either just constantly giving, because in our culture, we think that we can just, we very much say, wow, you have to be a giver, you have to be a giver. And we don't even know the difference between receiving and taking, right? If I take your shirt, you're pissed at me. But if you say to me, hey, Roz, here's a gift for you. This is a shirt. Then if I go, no, thanks, I don't want that shirt, then you're like, wow, that didn't feel good. And I
Right.
probably don't feel good either. But if I say, wow, like, thanks, thanks for the shirt, I'm receiving, I'm not taking, right? And we have no idea how to do that in a graceful way, and we have no idea how to accept the pleasure of receiving into our bodies because we have been shamed about that. We've been told that we are not supposed to receive. And in sex, it is really a problem because people will, I'm going to give. And actually, men are often more now. When I was younger, it was the other way around, but men are often more guilty of this. I got to give my partner an orgasm. I have to make my partner happy. And they make themselves so crazy trying to do that they don't receive pleasure themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a lot of women, cisgender women, who essentially have been socialized that they're not supposed to feel sexual pleasure at all. And so if they do, they feel guilty, or they have to hide it somehow, like, oh, I can't, look like I'm feeling pleasurable. But that's just sex, right? But it's true in all areas of our lives. So the book is about how we block ourselves from receiving touch, food, sex, love, lots of things we block ourselves from receiving. There are chapters on all of those things. Even receiving beauty through our eyes, we don't always know how to do. We just rush everywhere. We're just do. And we don't know how to take in and actually fully enjoy what we're in the moment of. And so the book is all about how we got there as a culture, and then how to literally like how to practice receiving.
Right. That just, it rings true, because it almost feels like, for me, it's like I had to do all this stuff before I could sit back and relax. Like you're saying, it's like I have to accomplish this before I can, have pleasure, or, it's like you have to earn it before you can reward yourself, I think is like a common mindset that people have. And so it is like stopping and smelling the roses, or, appreciating the sunset, or appreciating some sort of beauty. And I think it's part of that being vulnerable and open that a lot of men probably have to, practice on. And so, yeah, it sounds like an interesting book. I haven't read it, but I wanted to hear more about it. So thank you for that. So what other, I don't know, I don't want to say tips anymore.
Slow down. That's my second tip, is slow down. So if people are, and that's one of the simple ones that I can give people that I think almost always works. So if people want to know, a really simple thing you can do to have more pleasure when you're being sexual, it's slow down. Slow down your kissing, slow down your touching, slow down your lovemaking. And I don't mean hold off your orgasm. That's not what I mean. That's something you can do, because if you do hold off your orgasm, you will often find that later on it's more explosive, which is nice, but it's not, to me, there's a nice quick orgasm, and then there's a nice, delayed orgasm. So really I'm talking more about slowing down the entire process. This can be really scary for people. They can even, especially, and I hate to make it generational, but it is. Millennials find this creepy. sometimes. They literally, I've had students say to me, he keeps looking me in the eye during sex. And I'm like, wait a minute, whoa, like that's not okay with you? Like you're doing a very intimate thing here, you know? It's your boyfriend. It's not a one-night stand. It's your boyfriend, and you're freaked out because he's looking you in the eye. But people are, because they're so, I think, and I do think this is a porn effect. What they've been exposed to is not intimacy during sexuality. And I want to be clear that I'm not saying you should be in a relationship when you have sex. I think there can be casual sex that's a very extraordinarily fulfilling for people. You know, it's a one night, it's a blah, blah, blah. I remember it for the rest of my life. But even in a casual encounter, if you will, people can be respectful. They can be slow. It can be very intimate in that you're sharing a body with someone else. And you can take it slow and have a really, really beautiful experience, even with somebody you don't know very well.
Yeah. Is it part of this instant gratification that kind of the new world seems to be like obsessed with? Is like you can pull out your phone and get anything you want in a moment. And so
I think, yeah.
People just, don't take the time to slow down. And it's more of like an old school thing almost now, it seems like, to slow down.
I think some of it is instant gratification, and I think some of it is that we're so damn goal-oriented in our culture. We literally think, okay, here's what we want to get accomplished. And we don't think about it that way. We're not like consciously saying, all right, here's what I want to get accomplished. Well, actually some people do, right? I want to get laid tonight, right? That's really common, right? Like, I'm going out and get laid. But what does that actually mean? Does it mean that do you really just want to get laid? Probably not. You probably want to have a pleasurable encounter with someone you find attractive and someone you find to be good company, even if it's for a short period of time, right? So people don't think about fully what they want, but they get very goal oriented. This is what I want. I'm going to do this. And then once they get in bed with somebody, again, they're goal oriented. I want my orgasm. I want to get that person off. Like, and instead of just saying, let's see what happens. Because let's see what happens can be a lot more fun than this is what I want out of this situation. It can be. It doesn't have to be, but it can be.
Yeah, I don't know who said it, but one of the good quotes that I remember about sex is, it's like music. It's all about the journey and enjoying the song. It's like, if you just wanted the end, you would just skip to the end of the song. And so you wouldn't listen to the song and enjoy the song. You just go to the end every time. And so it's really enjoying the moment, enjoying each note, enjoying all the small things and the nuances that make it what it is. And so it's all about the journey and, enjoying the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Well,
I just want to thank you, Dr. Roz, for everything that you do and teach people. I know you have a blog and your institute. So where should people go to find you and find out more?
InstituteForSexuality.com. That's it. InstituteForSexuality.com. And my book is available on Amazon. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And thank you for being on the show.
Absolutely.